Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. So inshallah, in today's brilliant book for Brilliant Minds series, I'm sharing a book that I really enjoyed. I actually did not get to finish it in all detail. I had to skim over some parts. But this is a book called The Tipping Point. The Tipping Point, written by Malcolm Gladwell, which you see on your screen. The subtitle of the book says, How Little Things Can Make a Big Difference. How little things can make a big difference. So Malcolm Gladwell, he has written a number of books. His first book was The Tipping Point, which was it was a big hit. And then he wrote a book called Blink, which was a little bit about something that we talked about in Jummah today, where every day we're making so many decisions, but many of those decisions, they're happening automatically. Like our brain is deciding when is the right time to blink our eyes. We're not consciously thinking about it. And he basically goes into a lot of social science research and a lot of studies that basically make the points that he's trying to put forward. Then he wrote another book called The Outliers, which is another amazing book, which is basically, if you think about all of the people who, let's say all the singers out there, what makes a particular singer become the biggest blockbuster type of singer? What makes them be an outlier from everybody else? And the same thing applied to so many different fields, and he basically came up with something called the 10,000 hour rule. He says that if you do something for 10,000 hours, you become an expert at it, and no one can beat you. So he basically shows that again and again in many different cases. Then he has a book called What the Dog Saw. He has another book that I recently read called David and Goliath, another amazing book about if you are in the position of David, who is basically small, not properly armed young boy, facing a giant of an enemy, heavily armed, fully armored, but David wins over Goliath. So he basically does a lot of studies on different scenarios, different real historical examples of how small groups were able to, or small even individuals were able to overcome massive problems that you could never imagine such a big change to come. And another two books that he's written, Talking to Strangers and The Bomber Mafia. I have not read these books yet, but I am looking forward to them. So, what do you see on your screen? Yawning. So yawning is a surprisingly powerful act. So what happens is, just because you read the word yawning, it is possible that you might feel like yawning. And when you see one person yawning, there's actually a YouTube video of this guy. He just goes by somebody sitting on a bench, and he just yawns in front of them, and they start yawning as well. It's very contagious. So basically, he starts off the book by saying that, look, yawning is something so simple, but who can explain the contagiousness of yawning? But, so basically this book is a study of how things spread and become viral. They basically talk, he literally talks about viruses, talks about certain diseases, talks about certain fashion trends, talks about certain ideas, and goes on and on. So, how many of you have ever heard about a guy named William Dawes? No one? How many of you have ever heard about a guy named Paul Revere? Okay, we got one guy. Only one person went to school in America. The rest of you went to school somewhere else. That's why you don't know Paul Revere. So Paul Revere was the famous guy who basically ran through the town around Boston area and said the British are coming, because a young stable boy had overheard that the British soldiers were planning an attack. And he came and he told Paul Revere, and William Dawes was another guy who also heard the same information. And Paul Revere got on his horse, and he ran through several small towns, 13 miles altogether, warning all of them, knocking on doors, saying, the British are coming, get ready, get your weapons and everything ready to fight them, they're coming. William Dawes did the same thing. No one paid attention. The towns where William Dawes went, the British came and they found them to be heavily friendly because nobody was prepared to fight them. They were basically immediately put down. The towns where Paul Revere went, when the British came, they found a properly armed and ready militia ready to fight them and push them back. So he says, how come William Dawes did not have the same effect as Paul Revere? What do you think? Any theories? He didn't really have time to be persuasive. He was just knocking on doors and saying, hey, British are coming, get ready. I've got news that the British are coming. So this is actually one of the key points about how things become viral. He says that if you put it in the hand of someone like William Dawes, who's a nobody, no one listens to them. But if you put it in the hands of someone who the people know and respect, and this person is well connected, then this person will say the same thing, but everyone will listen to them. So he says the messenger really matters, that who is the one that's showcasing your idea or your product. So he says the tipping point is his first book, and it was a massive hit, not least due to the value that it created for businesses and marketers. Businesses and marketers, they took this book and they started slicing and dicing it and saying, okay, how can we implement this in our marketing strategy? Because this is like groundbreaking research, who now had the first sketch of a blueprint on how to promote their ideas better. So he says that the most powerful way to spread an idea is word of mouth. Word of mouth. And he says that until today, businesses, with all the ads and everything, the thing that they're really trying to get to is for it to become a word of mouth epidemic, that it would spread from friend to friend. This is the most powerful, most effective way. He says, think about this. How many of you So he says that if you look back in your life and you think about your friends, it is very likely that your friends were introduced to you by one common friend. That one common friend had so many friends, when you started hanging out with him, you started getting introduced to other friends. Same way he says that your activities that you do, whatever it is that you do like for fun, most likely a friend, you must have seen it, but you never tried it until a friend of yours took you and introduced you to it. So he says that the word of mouth is the most powerful method of spreading an idea. So of course that's hints for us as to how we can benefit from this research. So the main ideas of the book are three main ideas he proposes. It says that number one, he says that once an idea reaches the tipping point, it spreads like fire. At that point, you can't stop it. What is that tipping point? He says that, one of the theories is the 20% rule, which is that 20% of the employees do 80% of the work. 20% of beer drinkers drink 80% of the beer. 20% of criminals commit 80% of the crimes. So he says that 20%, if 20% of the people are convinced of an idea, they can have 80% of the effect of whatever that idea is. He says that, number two, he said that there are three kinds of people that are responsible for getting ideas to tip. How can you get the idea to tip over? You have to get it into three types of people's hands. And of course, is Paul Revere one of them? Yes. He's saying that Paul Revere is one of those type of people that the same idea in the hands of two people, one person causes an entire militia to get ready and fight the British, while the other town is still sleeping, even though William Dawes came and warned them about it. Number 3, he said that your ideas, if you want them to stick, if you want them to spread, they have to be sticky. They have to stick with people. Meaning, like, let's say that you are selling food. You're trying to do this word of mouth, social experiment. You're doing all sorts of marketing techniques in order to get the word out. But at the end of the day, if your food is not good, it's not going to matter. But if your food is good, but no one knows about it, it's not going to be well known. But if your food is good and you are able to basically market it the right way, it could become the hottest thing in your town where people are coming from out of town in order to come get it. If you think about any restaurant where they have lines outside people, outside the restaurant. Anybody can think of a restaurant in the Austin area that has lines outside? Oh, apparently there were lines. Yeah, I did hear about that. Well, this is just very new. About some old restaurant. Anybody have any? Chick-fil-A. Okay, so if you think about Chick-fil-A, Chick-fil-A's marketing strategy is very different from other restaurants. Usually, it's just another chain, but then a friend of yours tells you, hey man, their so-and-so is really good. And you're like, I gotta go try this. You could spend millions of dollars of putting ads in front of them, but that one friend telling you that, man, I tried it, it was so good, it is more powerful than all of those ads that you have seen. So in almost all cases with regards to restaurants that have like long lines in front of them, and Chick-fil-A is even a fast food type restaurant, but I'm thinking about like, those small little shack type restaurants which have a huge line outside of it every time you go there. Think about, I don't know if you ever know about in New York City, they have these halal food carts, okay, and they came around about 20 years ago when I was living in New York. And it was a very new concept of chicken and lamb over rice with some sauce on it. And there was this one famous place where, the Halal Guys, that was the name. Halal Guys is now a national chain, but it was actually a little roadside food cart. It was probably a little bigger than this table, essentially. And they were standing on the corner of 5th Avenue or 6th Avenue and 54th Street or something like that. And slowly but surely, word started spreading, and you would go there at midnight, you might see a line of 80 people in front of you to get that food. So the first they had one on one corner, then they became two, then they became three on three corners. And then people started copying them. And now in New York City, the most famous, most well-known, most popular food it's just called halal. Somebody says, hey, what are you getting for lunch? He says, I'm getting halal for lunch. Okay? And what does halal mean? Halal means like a halal food cart where they're going to get that chicken rice type of platter. So so the point being that word of mouth, but how does word of mouth spread? You don't necessarily just put it in the hands of, some people won't have an effect and some people will have a great effect, depending on who it is. And then the third point, as we mentioned, that the idea itself has to stick. So they say that with regards to a song, sometimes a song gets stuck in your head. Sometimes a certain ad has a certain line that gets stuck in your head. Sometimes a certain iconic image gets stuck in your head. I don't know if anybody is old enough to remember. I'm obviously not old enough. I read about it in school and in history books and documentaries about 1992 presidential campaign. Can anybody remember the most famous slogan from the 1992 presidential campaign? What is that? Clinton versus Bush. Bush's father. So they came up with a an ad with a line, which was, "It's the economy, stupid," right? It was like, it's the economy, meaning everything else they're trying to call your attention to doesn't matter if America's economy is crashing. And this message just stuck with people, that it was a huge upset that Clinton, as a governor of a small state, beats a sitting president who has been in the White House for literally 12 years before him. He was 8 years VP, then 4 years president, and has a successful war, which was the Operation Desert Storm, all under his belt, and he still loses the election because they banked on the economy idea, and it just stuck with people. So, if you remember, in 2008, there was an iconic image. Anybody remember that? What was that image? Obama of what? Remember that hope image? And of course, change, right? Yes, we can. Yes, we can. These type of ideas, you can't forget it. When you experience it, it kind of stays with you and it keeps coming back to you. So these are, of course, all ideas that we can implement in our current situation, where we are trying to get in a certain idea to stick. We can learn a lot from that. So let's break them down. So number one, he says that idea spreads like wildfire once it reaches the tipping point. But in order to spread like fire among the dry bushes, an idea first has to reach what Gladwell calls the tipping point. It's the point of critical mass where your idea goes from interesting to a few people to a must-have for everyone. So usually think about an app. An app starts and it's interesting to a few people until it reaches a critical mass. Once it reaches a critical mass, then it basically just goes crazy and it spreads like wildfire. So he says that example of Instagram, that up until February 2012, Instagram was not very well known. There was just a small few early adopters to it. And then it hit critical mass in February 2012. And it's basically, growth curve is basically, it's going like this, and all of a sudden it goes like that. He says that right there is the critical mass. So he says that what you have to work towards is to hit that critical mass. You don't have to work towards making it reach all the people. You just need to work towards hitting that critical mass and focus your energy on that, and that will basically take it to the next level. He gives an example of a fax machine. He says that 1984, Sharp makes a fax machine, and they sell 80,000 of these machines. In 1990, 5 million machines in homes in America. Why? He says that in 1987, the point was hit when finally enough people owned a fax, so it made sense for the rest of the world to get one too. Meaning, they said that, so he says that the first fax machine, it cost $2,000 on the retail market. And of course, they had spent millions of dollars of R&D in order to get it. Now, what is the value of that first fax machine? What's the value for you to have that first fax machine? Nothing. What are you going to do with it? You are the only person that has a fax machine. Okay? Now, when a second one is sold, now there's some value because you can communicate between the two. So basically, initially, people say, oh, why would I get this new app when none of my friends are using it? I can't communicate with them on it. But slowly but surely, as it spreads, more and more people basically get on it. Now the value increases, a network is created. Eventually it becomes like, man, everybody has it. I better get into it fast. So he says that with regards to the fax, but then he says, eventually, you go to the opposite end of this, where fax has become so widespread. Now there's this new thing in the market called a cellular phone. And there's a few in the market where you're like, we don't need it. But eventually it starts to spread and spread and spread, and then fax becomes obsolete because now it's kind of useless. New technology has come, and now that is spreading. So every trend that comes, there's a trend that there comes a point where it basically reaches its maximum potential and it loses value. He says that value of things is in scarcity. Basically, gold and diamond is valuable because there's a limited amount of it. If every single rock on earth turned into diamond, no one would want to buy diamonds anymore because it's available. So he says that value is in scarcity. So if something becomes too much, then it loses value. Can anybody tell me, just use this point and make it a practical lesson of how we can apply that in our communities, in our lifestyle? That value is in scarcity. And I see the man walking up, just the man that I needed to hear this point. Okay, so let's say that you create a WhatsApp group in order to tell people about events in the masjid. Okay? Now, you start to send messages on it, and people are like, wow, thank God, I usually don't know what's going on in the masjid, thank you for making this. So this is where you're basically in the early adopter, where people are like, wow, this thing is so good. Eventually, you reach a point where there are so many people, you send a message, you see immediate response. You're like, wow, it's working really good. So, when fax machines are at, let's say, maybe 1 million, there is enough value for it. But then there comes a point where you start sending messages day and night. Okay, you send a message in the morning, this event going on, this event going on, this event going on, this event going on. What do you and I do to those WhatsApp groups? We mute them, and we never open them. So value is in scarcity. The more you put it out there, the less value you have. So you have to be very smart and careful as to how much messaging you're putting out there so you don't lose the value of it. They say that if a person who doesn't normally speaks, then this person, whatever comes out of their mouth is going to be full of wisdom. And the person who's talking all the time is probably talking useless. That's what some of us do with regards to our social media, where we are posting anything and everything. Like that uncle that you might have who's retired, who sits at home, and they forward you every single WhatsApp message, and every day you get 27 messages from them. I don't read them. In fact, I tell some of those people, I tell them, look, I will only read your message if it says, Brother Jawad, I have a special message, important message for you. If it doesn't say that, I'm not even going to open your message. Because I'm getting so many other uncles like that messaging me that I can't pay attention to everything. So in order to kind of differentiate between what's important and what's not, we have to have a certain code. Basically, value is in scarcity. So when you're doing advertisement, when you're trying to promote something, think about how you can find the right balance of putting it out there, but at the same time not putting it so much that people feel like every rock has turned into diamond. There's got to be something special to it. Then lesson 2, he says that there are 3 types of people, or 3 kinds of people that are responsible for getting ideas to tip. So first he says that, look, this theory called the 6 degrees of separation. So here you have a guy, a random person, anyone in the world, and here you have the Pope. So he says that the theory says that any person is connected to any other person in 6 degrees or less. You know someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows the person that you're trying to reach. Anyone in the world, you will find that there are 6 degrees or less of separation between you. So, but he says here's the important point, that each one of these 4 people in the middle, their number of links are not equal. So let's say that this person, so actually he cites an amazing experiment. He said that this social scientist, he went to a rural town in Nebraska, and he gave, I don't know how many number was it, but he took a small group of people, maybe like let's say 100 people, and he gave them all a envelope, a folder, and he says, look, can you please get this envelope to a certain stockbroker who lives in Boston? All you know is his name and that he's a stockbroker in Boston, and there's no internet, there's no searching. You have to figure out a way to send it to him. So basically, if you are living in that rural town in Nebraska and you have a friend that's going to Chicago on a business trip, what would you do? You would say, hey, can you take this and give it to somebody because Chicago is closer to Boston? Maybe someone there knows that person. So one person sends it this way, another person's, best friend moved to New York and he sends it to him. And basically all of them, they different ways, completely random ways, trying to get it to that stockbroker in Boston. And of course, he says that each person that you send it to, just write your name and where you live, and then pass it on to the next person that you think can get it to the stockbroker in Boston. So I think that 27 of them reached that stockbroker. So that scientist went and he collected those, and he looked at them, and maybe 10 of them had come to him from the same person. Meaning that those people in rural Nebraska, 10 of them, they knew the same person in this town near Boston. They didn't know him, but somehow their lines ended up here. So basically what he's saying is that one guy, that 10 letters came to him to give it to this stockbroker, that guy had a very big network that so many people knew him. So he says it's not that the 6 degrees of separation, each one of us knows the same amount of people, but it is that I may only know 2 people, but that one of those 2 people knows another person, but that guy has a huge social network and he knows like maybe 200 people. So through him, we are connected to all the people that those 200 people are connected to. So he says that the 3 kinds of people that you need to get your ideas in their hands in order to get the idea to tip, he says number 1 are the connectors. The connectors, they have a massive social network with many acquaintances and allow ideas to spread from one social group to the next. So, think about, if I told you in Austin, I told you, okay, I'm going to tell you a name. I want you to tell me who has the best chance of knowing this person. Okay, let's say I tell you a name. Let me think about the most unknown name I know of, an actual person. And I tell you, okay, find me someone who would know him. So I have a friend of mine. His name is Tahmid Chaudhry. Okay, if I tell you, hey, who can figure out who is Tahmid Chaudhry? What would you do? You know what you should do? You should ask the Imam. And the Imam, I would ask my other Imam friends, and I can bet you that one of the Imams knows Tahmid Chaudhry, and probably most other people in the city of Austin. Probably Imams have a huge social network because everybody comes. So basically, that's what you do, that if you want to find out, you find out the people who have huge social networks. And if you put the information in their hand, they are connected to so many different social circles, they can easily transfer it. Okay? Now, what lesson we can learn from this? I don't know if you ever bought something and they ask you, or you sign up for a service and they ask you a quick survey. It says, how did you hear about us? How many of you have ever done that? How did you hear about us? And it will give you an option: Facebook ad, YouTube ad, word of mouth, friend, family member, this and that. Why do they ask you that? They're trying to figure out, hey, we're putting $10,000 in this, we're putting $10,000 in this. This one is bringing us most of the results, so let's put another 5 in there and take it out from where it's not working. So this feedback loop is very important. And that reminds me that we just put out a survey from the masjid. So you need to make sure that you fill out that survey. Now, that survey is an anonymous survey. However, it basically tells us about how the services and programs in Ramadan were. So we could, now I tell you that this book tells you how important data is. And think about that right now, one of the biggest ways to build wealth is actually by selling data. By selling data. Because think about every ad that you're seeing on YouTube, they have the data about you. They're actually catering those ads to you. Every ad that you're seeing on Facebook, every ad that you're seeing on Instagram, on every network that is there, these people are paying lots and lots of money to get your data. So the ad that they will show you, they already know that you're interested in a product like this. So one thing that we need to think about is to start thinking about protecting our data. Because we might say, well, what's wrong if a certain company who's just come out with a new type of cell phone stand for a car wants to get my data? But you know what? Who else is getting your data? The Zionists, the Chinese, the Burmese, the North Koreans, the crown princes, and they're getting your data as well, and they are using that data to try to turn the world in their favor. So what we want to do is we want to be conscious of this and try to implement practices where our data will be a bit more protected. Okay? So by the way, I got this new, it's not new, but it's new app browser called DuckDuckGo. DuckDuckGo is a privacy-first search app and a browser. So it does not store your data, and if it doesn't store it, obviously it doesn't sell it. Because right now, everything, every website you're going to, that website is already being given your data, and what they're showing you, they're only showing you. So it's a dangerous world in that way that it can be misused, and it is being misused, by the way. All right, so the first type of 3 kinds of people that you need to get your idea in their hand. First are the connectors. Second are mavens. He says the mavens, these are people that are information brokers. So let me ask you this. So if I tell you, hey, I'm thinking about buying an electric vehicle. Do you know anybody that knows something about it? Whose name would you say? There's probably someone in the community who knows everything there is to know about electric vehicles. Okay? How cost effective they are, how you charge them, what kind of chargers you need, what's the good, what's the bad. There's someone in there in the community that is a specialist on every subject. And if you get that information to this person then starts to tell people, hey, like let's say you made a new car and you were able to convince a maven, an electric vehicle aficionado, that, hey, this is a good vehicle. This person, every single person that comes to him, he'll tell him, hey, get this one. So he's going to basically spread it all around in his network because people come to him for information and they consider him an authority in that information. So that's the second type. And the third type are the salesmen. This is not actually people who work in sales, but basically salesmen are people that boast about ideas they love, and their incredibly positive energy is contagious. So basically, there are some people, if they buy a shirt from a new company and you meet them outside the masjid, you were talking about, politics, and somehow that guy is going to take you into a conversation about why this shirt company is so good. You know people like that? So these are the salesmen in society. They are the ones that their energy is so contagious that they will convince the people, and everywhere they go, they'll say, hey, this is the company that you should be buying shirts from. By the way, there's a company that I'm trying to buy their shirt, but it's so expensive. This company turns plastic water bottles into clothing. So they recycle the bottles, they turn them into thread, and then they make shirts out of them. But one t-shirt is like $45. So I'm waiting for them to get a little cheaper so I could start buying from them. But basically, the salesmen in society, these are the ones that basically, they spread the idea. So if this guy went and saw a movie last night, the next day, everyone, if he liked it, everyone he comes across, he's going to tell them, hey man, this movie is so great. Think about if this guy goes to eat at a restaurant and he likes the food, he's going to tell everybody about it. If he doesn't like the food, he doesn't like the service, he's going to tell everybody about it as well. So we all know people like that. He says that products or ideas tip if you get them in the hands of these people who are either connectors or mavens or salesmen. So let me ask you this, a real life example. The student protest in college campuses. How do you think that this wildfire started? Columbia University. Columbia University. Now, where would you put Columbia University? In connectors, mavens, or salesmen? Connectors. Everybody, Columbia University is one of the top universities in America. It's very expensive, it's Ivy League, it's very hard to get into, and all of that prestige that's associated with it. So anything that happens there is basically tells everybody else that, hey, if they have adopted it, we should adopt it as well. And basically, the idea spread like wildfire from there that, hey, this is what we should be doing, protesting on the university campus in order to get them to divest. So if you want your idea to go viral, getting it in the hands of a few of these key players is crucial to hitting critical mass. Lesson 3, if your idea isn't sticky, it will never tip. If your idea isn't sticky, so you could do all the marketing, you could get all of those connected individuals and social media influencers, they call them, right? You can get your ideas in their hands, how many products they review. The thing is that if you order that product because an influencer recommended it, because he got paid for it, you order that product is not good, you're not going to want to tell your other friend that, hey, I got this new cell phone holster and it's so good, you should get it. Because it wasn't good in the first place. So he says if it's not good, if it's not sticky, it will never tip. So he says that when it comes to ideas, he says the way you package your information has to be very crafty. So he gives an example, I think it was in the 1970s or 80s, that there was a cigarette brand called Winston. Anybody know about this? Anybody? We don't need to know how you know about it, okay? So anybody remember a famous tagline that associated with Winston? What is that? No, the cigarette. Winston is so good. Winston tastes good like a cigarette should. And basically what they had is that they had put like some sort of a filter on it. So basically the people were saying that cigarettes that have filters, they don't taste like real cigarettes. So this company, they made this ad and the tagline was, Winston tastes good like a cigarette should. And this thing was easy to remember. And it basically became a tagline that you could easily tell people, hey, this thing tastes good like it should. And it basically became the #1 brand in America at the time for a while, where it spread. Alhamdulillah, now it's out. All cigarettes are, kind of slowly going out, and we need to discourage our brothers and sisters and friends who are into smoking. So he said the stickiness factor is a very important characteristic of ideas that basically reach the tipping point. He said it doesn't matter how many influencers you get to vouch for your idea or how many testimonials you can collect for the front page of your book. If your book is bad, it will never reach the masses. Gladwell calls this the sticking factor, and it answers the question, is your idea memorable enough to make people take action? Is your idea memorable enough to make people take action? Another idea I was thinking about this is that if you think about how many imams are there in, let's say, just the Western world, okay, America, England, English-speaking world, let's say. How many are there? Let's say at least, 500 to 1,000. That all have live stream cameras in their masajid, they put everything on YouTube. But how many of them, they actually get shared? Most of them, they're getting like 200 views, and those 200 people are people from their masjid, including me. But there are some that they put out a video and it gets like 40,000 views in one night. What is it about them? At some point, these people basically tipped. Their YouTube channel tipped at one point, and now it has spread like a wildfire. And there was a time when they were getting 200 views, then something happened, something they did or something they said that basically made them stick with people, and they started sharing them, and basically the tipping point came over. Now they could even like put out like a video made by mistake, like in their back pocket, it was left on, and that thing ends up on their YouTube channel. That thing will get 30,000 views as well. So is your idea or your product or your food memorable enough to make people take action? That will they want to go and tell their friend about it? If you want something to go viral, you can't think about making something viral. If you want something to go viral, you can't think about making it viral. Just make it so good, so great, that one person who sees it cannot live without sharing it. So if let's say you were to make a movie, if your movie is so good that when the viewers see it, they're like, man, I gotta tell my friends about how great this movie is, they gotta come watch it. So he says, don't focus on making it go viral, focus on making it good, and it will have the stickiness factor to it. So even though it may go slow until you get those connectors and mavens and salespeople, but until then, every person that will see it, it will stick with them. They will pass it on, So you will get the most powerful method of marketing, which is word of mouth marketing. So Gladwell's writing is gripping. He weaves stories and tales and hides baffling discoveries inside of them. They're really, I tell you that I went through I've been living and breathing this book for the last week. And I'm planning to go back and do it again because it's so fun to read it. Actually, there's a YouTube video where they have the whole book recorded in audio. And you also see the words on the screen, and it's basically following along. So while you're driving, while you're at home on your big screen TV, you could basically put it on. And there are lots of amazing stories and social experiments. This summary that we gave you will give you the nuts and bolts, but to witness the magic of writing of Gladwell, you have to, I would say, get the book. It will be beneficial, and see how we can implement the lessons that we learn from this into da'wah, into our businesses, into whatever it is that we are trying to spread. That's the tipping point. That's the book, and it was published in 2000, the year 2000. So some of the references are a bit old. Like he doesn't talk about some of the newer things. And these are some of his other books: The Tipping Point, Blink, Outliers, David and Goliath, Talking to Strangers, The Bomber Mafia, and whatnot. And interestingly, I just looked up, I said, what's Malcolm Gladwell's stance on Israel? So he says that he chose to deliberately not write about Israel in his book, David and Goliath. But if you pay attention, he actually, I would estimate that he equated Israel to Goliath and the Palestinian resistance to David. And he says that he instead of using this example, he used the British government versus the Irish Republican Army. And he talks about how basically the crown became the Goliath, and the small Irish separatists and rebels, they became David. And of course, it was a huge pain for the crown, for the British, to basically handle this issue, because they just could not put them down. No matter how much power they brought, whatever resources, weapons, and everything they brought, they were not able to put it down. So that is that. Does anybody have any questions or? Yes. I can't hear you. Can you repeat it? So actually, a lot of his examples are from the pre-internet era. From even some of them are from 200 years ago, 300 years ago. So remember, I gave the example of Paul Revere, which was in the War of Independence, was essentially started by that event of Paul Revere going through the town saying the British are coming. So the militia got ready to fight them. So he says that these principles are universal principles, and it doesn't matter. In the end, he has a chapter, he has a few pages called Beware of Immunity. He says that, for example, with let's say Facebook, there was a time where Facebook was the hottest thing, and there came a time where everybody has Facebook, so now Facebook is not as effective as it used to be. Now people are moving to different platforms. He says, so beware of immunity, that it may reach a point where it's not having any effect, because it has become because value is in scarcity. It has become so widespread that people don't consider it special. So now you need to think about some more creative way of coming up with some sort of special way to connect with people. So, so is the digital marketing the right platform? So actually, I was listening to something that they were saying that social media is what has allowed the monopoly of the traditional media to be challenged. The narrative that the traditional media puts out is heavily controlled, but social media can immediately challenge it live through a video. And you can spread it so fast. And think about that, even in digital marketing, there are certain people that if they post it on their feed, immediately 2 million people are going to see it. But he might see it from an unknown guy who only has 10 people on his network, but one of those 10 people is that one guy that has 2 million followers. So can it still work? It can still work, but you will have to be creative. So a lot of us, we are shadow banned. Where if we post something about Palestine, for example, on social media, they're controlled by those guys. So they basically, in the past, they used to say your account is shut down because you violated community guidelines. But now they got smarter, because when they would shut them down, people would make a lot of fuss. They would say, we will sue you and this and that. So they would say, okay, we have to open their account. Now, but that guy knew he's been banned. Now, you can post whatever you want. They won't shut you down. But their algorithm will basically make your post not appear in the timeline of your friends. So you may have, I have several thousand followers, and sometimes when I post, maybe only 2 people click on it, which basically means that all of those thousands of followers, Facebook didn't let them see what I posted. That's called shadow banning. So now, of course, they say that if cops come up with a new, if the government comes up with a new technology to build to make $100 bill, the people who are making fake bills, they get that machine too. And then they are basically on top of that. So alhamdulillah, some of our brothers and sisters, they are so creative that they will write Palestine in a way that the computer algorithm cannot tell that this is Palestine written. They will use different letters, different symbols, different type of things where the algorithm can be fooled into missing that. So there's all sorts of stuff, but of course, one of the things that I think that we need to do is, as a community, we need to think about moving off of these platforms and moving into something else. Because at one point, the argument was that if we stay there, then we could have an impact. But right now, what they have done is that basically you are being shadow banned. So anybody who is posting anything of that sort, no one is seeing you anyways. And no one is seeing you anyways. So these are things that we need to think about. Yes? So right in the end, he has a part is on exactly this. He says that in the information age, where is it? Okay. This is where he talks about it. He says that when people are overwhelmed with the information and develop immunity to traditional forms of communication, they turn instead for advice and information to the people in their lives whom they respect, admire, and trust. Okay? The cure for immunity is finding mavens, connectors, and salesmen. So to give you a real-life example of this, if you, God forbid, if you are going through a problem in your marital life, if you go on YouTube and you search up marriage advice, Islam marriage advice, you will get thousands of videos. And what are you going to experience? You're going to experience information overload. You don't know who to listen to. So what are you going to do? You're going to go to a real person and you're going to talk to them about it. This person may have less quality information, but because of the information overload over there, you rather go to someone in real life. So back in the days when internet was still starting up, you would go and you would be so happy, like you found an entire lecture on marital advice and you found 2 of them. Wow, it was very valuable. So, when I see, for example, everybody watching, like there's lots and lots of YouTube videos and khutbahs and stuff like that, everything going online, it doesn't necessarily lessen my load. Because there's so much over there that people like, oh, I can't connect with this. I need to go and talk to a real person. So basically, my appointment schedule is still full. So he says that there is this overload, but then the cure for this is to find mavens, connectors, and salesmen. Any other last questions, comments? Any sisters? Okay. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I hope you found it beneficial, and if you did, if it stuck with you, maybe you can share it with someone. What is that? Yeah, so I've been doing